I'm going to go ahead and call this March 3rd, 2025 meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. Thanks everyone for attending both in person and remotely. We'll start with our pledge. And Richard, would you lead us, please? And just for the record, Councilor Norton is excused this evening. We'll move on to communications from the public. We do have 3 public hearings advertised for this evening. So if you're here to speak on those individual hearings, please wait until I call those under item 6 of the agenda. Otherwise, anything you'd like to bring to the attention of the council, now would be your opportunity. And just name and address, please, for the record.
Bill Boland, 12 Green Place here in Whitefish. I want to publicly acknowledge the fire department for rescuing me from my mangled vehicle. 3 weeks ago, they did a superb job in extricating me and giving me medical aid on the way to Logan. So thank you all for that. And also, Frank, thank you for taking my place last week at the Community Development Board. Really appreciate all of your efforts.
I hope I did you proud. Thanks, Phil. Good to see you here tonight. Further public comment? Leo.
Leo Keene, 514 Pine Place in Whitefish. I did miss the public hearing on the Whitetail Ridge development, but I've read about it, and that's about all I know about it. I did download the map or the plat of it this afternoon, though, just to see what it is and where it is. I did want to compliment the council on preventing the developer from losing all the trees, as I think they requested, if they could clear cut or take down most of the trees. And I think Councilor Davis, thank you for bringing up the possibility of leaving all the trees except those that needed to be taken for the infrastructure. And then I was hoping, and then you also brought up the point that the homeowners or the builder could determine what trees had to be removed during the course of construction. By the looks of the plat, there's not going to be too many that will be preserved. They're pretty small lots, so at best maybe a tree or 2 per lot. I don't know how that ties into our tree ordinance, or if there's anything left of our tree ordinance, or if there's anything that can be done about it at this point. But the point is that an attempt was made to save some trees, and I do want to acknowledge that, and I appreciate that decision. Speaking of trees, though, I also would like to remind us that emerald ash borer, if it does cross the Continental Divide, which probably it will at some point, we're going to lose all our green ash trees in town. I'm just wondering if the city is aware of the potential for that loss of the street trees, and if we're thinking about maybe starting to replace them right now before it's too late and before they all have to come down and then we have no street trees. Curious about that.
I'm going to allow Maria Butts to address that comment, Leo, because I think she has some good news for you.
Okay, good.
Yep, we have developed an emerald ash borer plan, and we are working with our inventory to take down our ash trees and replace them with native trees that are not going to be disease or pest, that are more disease and pest resistant.
Great. What would the native trees be that we're replacing them with?
We have a full list of trees that are approved by the Tree Advisory Committee annually. And so that it develops each year, but you can find that on the city website. There's a full list.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad we're ahead of the curve on that one, because it's really devastating the trees east of here and way east of here too. They're all gone. Okay, one more thing, and it has to do with the deer herd in town. And I just do not hear anything substantial coming from the council or from the city on if there's a plan, if we're going to do something about it, or if we're just going to let wasting disease take care of the deer herd in town, or what are we going to do? Because there are a lot of deer, a lot of people are sick and tired of it, including me especially, although I love wildlife, but they've reached their carrying capacity way beyond, and they're destroying their own habitat, which is our backyard for one. 15 deer often in our backyard, which has turned into a pasture, used to be a very nice wooded site with nice understory and brush and very attractive, but now it's nothing but dirt. They're even starting to eat the Oregon grape, which is the one thing that they left behind, but now that's going too. Can I hear something about that? Are we doing something, or are we just letting it go?
We normally don't respond to comments, but I will, Leo, just so you don't have to stay till the end of the meeting. But we did have a work session a few meetings ago with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks regarding this very topic, and I believe the direction we provided staff, and Bridger chime in here if I'm incorrect, but we are going to be preparing a deer management plan internally. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So staff's working on it.
Staff is working on it. When can we expect some sort of momentum on that, or a decision being made?
Well, I think the first step is the plan itself, and I believe we've given the police department the time they need to complete that.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, I'll look forward to
forthcoming.
We'll definitely look forward to hearing about it. That's all I had to say. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Leo. Further public comment this evening? Richard.
Mayor and councilors, nice to see those two ties here at the council dais tonight. Very nice. Richard Hildner, 104 5th Street, Whitefish. Just a couple of things. I want to say thanks to to Craig and Alan Teifenbach for attending the presentation by Erica Fisher on infrastructure and wildfire, and it was really an important and I think informative talk that she gave, and will have some bearing and implications for us in our planning efforts. Along with that, this Thursday, the 7th, at FVCC and the Arts and Technology Building, from 6 to 8. There'll be a presentation by DNRC, Forest Service, and County Emergency Services. The presentation is a panel and discussion on how to prepare your home, property, and yourself for wildfire. And the topics that they'll be discussing and having a Q&A with are evacuation, home hardening, defensible landscaping, forest management, and grant funding opportunities. And so I would encourage folks that are listening, the reason I really came in was if anybody's watching out there in TV land, to come on down to FVCC and take part in that. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Further public comment this evening? Michelle, anyone online?
Those of you who are online, if there's anything that you'd like to address the council that is not advertised as a public hearing, please raise your hand or unmute your mic and speak your name and address, please. I think we're good.
Thank you, Michelle. We'll move on to volunteer boards. I'll start with the audience. Any volunteer board reports from the audience? How about the council? Not seeing any. We do have an item on the agenda. I'm not sure if there's a BMCA representative present. I thought so. Just so you don't have to wait until the end of the meeting, if you'd like to come up now, I can move that agenda item to the top and get you out of here early.
I was just thinking, I don't know the rules for the meeting. So I was like, what am I supposed to do?
Good.
I'm Kim Wortman, the Executive Director with the Big Mountain Commercial Association. We operate the shuttle network of Whitefish, commonly known as the Snow Bus. I just want to do a quick recap. The Snow Bus, we are on the road for 4 months out of the year in the winter with 3 buses every day. And we're on the road in the summer for 4 months with 1 bus every day. The city has been contributing $15,000 to the BMCA, the Big Mountain Commercial Association, for the last few years. And we are asking for a considerable increase to $100,000. We know that the city has made sustainability a priority, and we think that transportation is a big part of that. We recognize that we are not the perfect or the complete answer to transit for the city of Whitefish, but we are on the road and we are committed to maintaining and expanding services. We have broad community support with 109 local businesses as part of our membership. And if the city considered this increase, the $100,000 would make up 10% of our annual budget, with 90% of our funding still coming from private business. So I just appreciate you guys taking a look at our letter, and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Kim? Thanks, Kim. Giuseppe?
I think I know the answer, but just for the record, are we charging for any ticket?
Nope, still free rides. And we just completed a survey, and that's our number one thing that people really appreciate.
And they're free to whoever, either resident of Whitefish or not?
Anybody. Yep.
Thank you.
Additional questions? And council, would you like to address that request now or at the end of the meeting? Your prerogative. I do have one question for you, Kim. So the current operating budget's $935,000. If the city were hypothetically to meet your request, would there be an expansion in services resulting?
Yeah. Right now, that request would enable us to maintain our current service hours, because we have been, like everybody, fighting increased costs. An expansion in services, I think Dana and I had chatted a little bit, and one of the questions was, how do we get more summer service? And we are looking at needing another more like $175,000 to get more service on the road in the summer. So it'd be more about maintaining our current levels.
Okay. Dana, do you want to weigh in on this from a fiduciary standpoint?
Sure. I asked Kim to come forward tonight as we're getting ready to work on the fiscal year 2026 budget. You know that we had a request from the Whitefish Community Center at just the last meeting too. It's a lot easier for us to get these requests up front as we start to work on the budget, so that we're able to try to incorporate those changes if directed by council. We can specifically indicate, if there is a related property tax increase for an annual contribution, what that cost would be to community members as well within that budget creation process. So like we did with the Whitefish Community Center, given the legislature right now and unknowns with how they're going to address property taxes at the local level, my recommendation is to, if you're supportive of an increase, whether it's up to the $100,000 or at a different amount, provide that direction, and then we can do our best to incorporate it in the budget and then provide that information during the budget work sessions.
Steve, thanks, Dana.
Yeah, I think at this time, I think we need to see the numbers from Dana, so I don't think we can commit either way right now.
And we just wanted to, also kind of start the conversation and make sure that we're here and we're available, and if there's, any room to work together. We appreciate the city's contribution, right now, financial and also other support with, kind of a little bit of plowing on our bus stops and things like that. So we just, appreciate working with the city, and we wanted to put the request out there and put the idea out there to start thinking about, even if it's maybe continuing into the future, to kind of work on, how we could work together more.
Yeah, we'll certainly carry your request forward. How the budgeting process usually works is we hold a council retreat where we discuss short and long-term council and staff priorities. I'm sure this topic will come up. Transportation always does, but the budgeting process usually takes, in terms of development, numerous work sessions between the months of April and June, if I'm not mistaken. So there'll be ample opportunity to discuss this.
Can I ask one quick question?
You bet.
John?
Yep.
Yeah, Kim, do any other municipalities contribute to the snow bus?
No.
Okay.
Nope. And we only serve Whitefish. We don't have any inner city outside of Whitefish.
Right, I understand that. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Kim, very much.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate your letter. Yep. We'll move on to our consent agenda. You have the February 18th meeting minutes included in the packet. Can I have a motion, please?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Fury. Further discussion?
Just one comment.
Sure.
Doug, I apologize. I did not commit to memory all 272 pages of your submittal.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign, and the motion does carry unanimously. We'll move on to our first public hearing of the evening, which will be item 6A, a request from Devin Stuss, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Modus America Corp. For a conditional use permit to construct a second 12-unit multifamily apartment located at 719 Edgewood Place, and the property is zoned WR4, which is our high-density multifamily residential district. Wendy.
All right. Good evening. So the request before you is a second 12-unit building consisting of 12 studio apartments. The property is located at 718 Edgewood Place. Access and the parking will be shared with Phase 1. This is a Phase 2 of this project. Along with parking, they'll be adding an additional 9 parking spaces to be developed off the alley to the north. Vehicles will enter and exit the site via Edgewood Place and will utilize the existing parking lot. There's an existing stormwater facility that will be relocated to accommodate the new building, and the site will incorporate open space for the residents. The applicant's not using any affordable housing incentives, so they're not providing any deed restricted units. Again, the property's at 718 Edgewood Place. It's 0.79 acres and currently developed with a multifamily 12-plex building and associated parking. The property is surrounded by residential uses, has a WR4 zoning, which is intended for our higher density residential projects. The growth policy designation is high density residential, which corresponds to that WR4. The property is served by all public services and facilities. We did notice adjacent landowners, place illegal in the paper. We did receive 3 public comments, 2 in support and 1 kind of generally not in support of multifamily projects, not particular to this project, but kind of all of them. We do review conditional use permits according to the criteria in the zoning regulations. Again, it does comply with the growth policy designation of high density. It complies with the zoning regulations. It's a flag lot, so it has 15-foot setbacks on all sides, which is a little different than what you folks are used to seeing. Meets the residential density, the parking, they're providing 35 spaces. They're providing bicycle parking, which is required at 1 space for every 4 dwelling units, and in a convenient location. Height, lot coverage will all be confirmed at the time of building permit, so it does comply with the zoning regulations. Access, again, is off of Edgewood Place. The dimensions off of Edgewood and through the parking lot do meet the emergency service access standards, but in order to best serve emergency access and refuse pickup and the residents as well, the staff is recommending the alley from this project to the west out to Colorado be paved to the full width of the alley right away. The fire marshal will review the engineering and building plans to ensure all emergency standards are being met. So I provided a map on page 8 of the packet, which is actually 340 of 453 of your packet, showing that that alley to the north is an unpaved right-of-way, and so they'll be paving from their eastern edge all the way out to Colorado, and then the remainder would stay gravel. Again, most of the parking is existing with the additional 9 spaces being developed off the alley. The parking standards have changed since Phase 1 went in back in 2020, enabling the development of Phase 2 and just a few additional parking spaces. So 35 are being provided, including some ADA spaces. The The maneuvering space is adequate for two-way traffic, but they are taking advantage of a 2-foot vehicle overhang, which is kind of shrinking the pedestrian connections throughout the parking lot. And so we are asking that those sidewalks at least be a minimum of 5 feet wide. We also have some standards in the multifamily development standards talking about pedestrian circulation and how that's important as well. So we are recommending that condition, that all sidewalks have a 5-foot clear path, even if there is a 2-foot overhang, so they'd have to be widened out a bit. The open multifamily development standards require a minimum of 10% open space. Again, this standard was another one of those items adopted after phase 1 of this project went in. And so it's supposed to be integrated into the overall design rather than just leftover spaces. They do have, so 10% is 0.079 acres or 3,441 square feet. They're showing an open space area with a stormwater facility and a patio and pergola. And so while the stormwater facility may be open space in that it's landscaped and it's not being encumbered by a building, it's not really usable for the residents. And then the pergola location needs to have a 15-foot setback again because it is a flag lot. But within the phase 1 and the phase 2 areas, there is enough area for usable open space. And so we've recommended a condition to provide a plan on how that open space area can be made usable for the residents. Water and sewer are available to the site. Again, they will have to do another stormwater plan because they are putting their facility, or they're building where their existing facility is currently located. Again, the fire department requires the alley to be paved to the west to Colorado to facilitate suitable fire and emergency access. The use of T-turnarounds is allowed in the fire code, but the 2019 engineering standards update eliminated the use of T-turnarounds for larger projects such as this. T-turnarounds we found have become storage areas for either vehicles or snow. They can be challenging to maintain over the long term, and so it's easier to maintain a through road versus a T-turnaround. And this will improve response times and access for emergency services. They are showing a location for solid waste. We're recommending a condition that they work with Public Works and Republic Services to make sure it's in the right location. The property is located on Edgewood Place, which is a public street, and it was updated a few years ago with sidewalks on this particular side of the project, so there's no improvements needed on Edgewood. Traffic impacts should be minimal. A TIS was not required because it was less than 200 trips. Under neighborhood compatibility, the project is in a neighborhood where there are multifamily projects on this property. To the north, there's going to be quite a few multifamily projects, and there's some others in the neighborhood. The Community Development Board held a public hearing on February 20th. We had a member of the public speak in support of the project. Ultimately, the Community Development Board unanimously recommended approval. They did amend condition number 5 to require additional bicycle parking. So that new condition is that 6 bicycle parking spaces be required with the phase 2 building. So the board did recommend, subject to 11 conditions of approval, including that an alley needs to be paved from the westerly or easterly edge of this project all the way out to Colorado. The internal sidewalks must be improved to a minimum of 5 feet clearance. And if the parking overhangs the sidewalks of 2 feet, then the sidewalks must be widened to ensure a full 5 feet. Again, 6 parking spaces for bicycles, an engineered stormwater plan, work with Public Works and Republic Services for refuse disposal, and then a landscaping plan needs to be submitted with the building permit, and we'd like to see how they plan on having usable open space for the residents, and that can be included as part of the landscaping plan. Can I answer any questions for you?
Thanks, Wendy. We'll start with questions of the council. Any questions for Wendy on her staff report? Not seeing any. Wendy, thanks very much. We'll go ahead, and we did advertise for a public hearing. We'll hold that public hearing now. On item 6A of the agenda, any public comment? Michelle, anyone online?
Devin, at this time, if you'd like to speak, go ahead and unmute your mic and state your name and address, please.
Hi, Devin Stews. I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant Modus Ventures for 718 Edgewood Place. Dear Honorable Mayor and Council members, I apologize for not being able to be there in person, but greatly appreciate the accommodation to be able to speak through the virtual method. We are looking for your support to build another long-term rental apartment with 12 suites at 718 Edgewood. This would be the final phase of a two-phase development that Wendy explained. The suites are proposed to rent at around or between $1,200 and $1,300 a month, which is within the 60 to 80% of the area median income, providing affordability rent level. We believe this building supports what is sometimes called as the missing middle housing, which is the housing that needs to exist between affordable or truly affordable rental and first-time home buyers. The very close proximity to downtown supports walking, cycling, and will fuel a lively downtown with working residents and workers being able to live near the downtown businesses. We are looking for your support to add 12 more affordable units to Whitefish's goal of 1,310 affordable units by 2030 as identified in the 2020 Whitefish area community housing needs assessment update. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Appreciate your comments this evening. Any public comment on this item? One last time. Not seeing any. I'll turn it back to the council for preferably a motion.
Yeah,
Giuseppe.
Mr. Mayor, excuse me. I move to, I just lost it, to approve the WCUP 25-1, I think it is.
Correct.
The condition of the finding of fact of the staff report and the recommended conditions of approval, including the one that the Whitefish Development Board amended for the 3 to 6 bicycle slots.
Thanks, Giuseppe. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councillor Quinnell. Further discussion?
Just a comment that there's a, in my view, positive developments, and I'm thankful that the developers trust in the process, and we're at this point. And also, I'm excited to see that the change in ratio for the parking lots versus dwellings has enabled things like this. Thank you.
Agree with your comments, Giuseppe. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll move on to item 6B, which will be resolution 25-6, establishing a new fee schedule for all recreation programs, and this is on page 413 of your packet. Maria.
Good evening. My staff report is on 416. I have also included cost analysis sheets for each program and the proposed fee schedule for your reference. Annually, the Parks and Recreation Department evaluates our revenues and expenditures for the upcoming fiscal year, and we analyze costs for service, the history of past fee increases, and comparability of fees with similar municipalities and businesses. Through this process this year, we identified several fees that either did not cover the cost of the services provided and or were not consistent with fees in similar municipalities and or local businesses, which indicated that we needed to update and revise our recreation program fee schedule. To develop a new fee schedule, we follow our standard practice, which is to assess the cost of each program by evaluating staffing needs, supplies, and contracted services. Once we determine the cost of each program, we assess the typical level of participation from which we can determine a fee to recover our costs. This fee schedule is philosophically consistent with all of the past fee schedules in that the proposed fees fully cover the direct cost of programming, but do not cover all administrative fees, as to do so would place our recreation program fees far beyond those of neighboring municipalities and local businesses offering similar programs. Resident programs that serve as a form of child care for the working families in our community, such as after school and summer day camp, received increases of no more than 20%, rounded to the nearest $5, which is in line with the cumulative CPI since the last fee increase. Non-resident child-like program rates were limited to a 25% increase. This rate increase keeps these programs in line with similar municipalities. And then recreation programs other than after school and summer day camp, are optional programs and do not serve as childcare for our working families. Fees for these types of programs have remained historically low in comparison to market rate. Therefore, these fees were increased to reflect the market comparison with similar municipalities and local recreation programs. Within these programs, our water sports programs saw the most significant fee increase. In the past, the certified instructor with whom we contracted provided watercraft at no additional cost, and this instructor no longer offers this service, so the rental cost was added to that program rate. Fee increases are proposed for all recreation programs and have not been increased since 2020. These proposed increases will bring revenues for each program closer in line to associated expenditures. These fees would take effect for summer camp and recreation programs on April 1st of this year, when program registration opens for summer session, and then after-school rates would take effect August 1st of this year when registration opens for that program. On February 11th, 2025, at their regular meeting, the Park Board unanimously recommended that the Whitefish City Council approve the FY26 fee schedule as presented. The implementation of the proposed fee increases should not require any additional financial resources. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, but I, along with the Whitefish Park Board, respectfully recommend that the City Council adopt this resolution approving the FY26 Recreation Program fee schedule.
Thank you, Maria. Any questions for Maria? Not seeing any, we will move to our public hearing on Resolution 25-6. Any public comment this evening? Michelle, anyone online?
Those of you attending online, if you'd like to speak towards this resolution, please unmute your mic and state your name and address, please. I think we're good.
Thank you, Michelle. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to council. Steve.
Move to adopt Resolution 25-6, a resolution to establish a new fee schedule for all recreation programs.
And I second it.
Seconded by Councilor Caltabiano. Further discussion? Maria, I had one quick question. I didn't do all of the rate comparisons in terms of increase on a percentage basis, but did we more heavily weight some of the significant increases such as summer day camp rec programs and the water sports programs more towards the non-resident category versus residents?
Correct. Yes. So the non-resident fee would be higher, and a higher rate increase percentage-wise.
Good.
Yep.
Thank you. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. And that motion does carry unanimously. Thanks, Maria. Appreciate the detailed report. We'll move on to item 6C, which will be ordinance 25-3, rezoning 38 Central Avenue. The property is zoned WB3 with a WPUD or business district with a planned unit development overlay to WB3, which is our general business district, and adopting findings with respect to such rezone. Wendy.
All right. So the request before you is to remove an expired PUD. Back in 2021, the council approved ordinance 2116 for a PUD at 38 Central to build the hotel. And that has expired. It expired on December 1st, 2024. In March of last year, the zoning administrator approved an administrative CUP for the food truck court that's located out there currently. So really, the property is located at 38 Central. It is on WB3 with the PUD overlay. It has a commercial core land use designation. Is surrounded by commercial uses served by all public services and facilities. We did notice adjacent landowners place illegal in the pilot, and we received no comments. It's an expired PUD, so there's really kind of nothing to say. We did review it according to the criteria in the zoning regulations. It is made in accordance with the growth policy. All the other standards, of course, will be reviewed at the time of actual development of the property. And so the planning board, or the community development board, held a public hearing on February 20th, and there was no public comment, and they voted unanimously to approve the request.
Thanks, Wendy. Any questions? Steve.
Something that occurred to me after that meeting was that as part of the approval process for that PUD, one of the things that they were going to do for public benefit was to give 10% towards affordable housing, 10% of their proceeds in, I don't know for how long. Do we have anything, are we capturing any of that in the CUP that's there now?
Oh.
Okay.
Only for the PUD.
Is there a mechanism in the administrative CUP process? I know that we changed that for food trucks that the administrator could kind of hold the person's feet to the fire on something that's already been approved on that property?
Oh, nope. That PUD, you had to have a community benefit, and that was tied directly to that PUD. Conditional use permit have different review criteria. There's no community benefit requirement.
For a CUP?
For a CUP, right.
But could it be a condition of approval as something that mitigates the use in that area? Not something that we could do?
Oh.
Okay. I mean, I know that it's already water under the bridge. The CUP's been approved. I'm just thinking in the future, if this happens, it might be nice to continue
They're two separate
get
review processes.
I get it. Okay. I'm just wondering if that's a possibility.
Standards, I would say.
Okay. Thank you.
Additional questions? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on what will be ordinance 25-3, and we'll hold that public hearing now. Any public testimony? Michelle, anyone online?
Those of you attending online, if you'd like to speak towards this, please unmute your mic and state your name and address, please. We're good.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for preferably a motion. Andy?
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve WZC 25-02, findings of fact, and the staff report, and then as recommended to us by our very own Whitefish Community Development Board at their February 20 meeting.
Thank you, Andy. Is there a second?
That would be on a first reading.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Fury. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, and those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously, which brings us on to item 7A. You have Dana's written report enclosed in the packet. Any questions for Dana? Dana, I had one question. Several of us testified at the IZ hearing a couple weeks ago, myself included. Did that come out of committee?
No, it was tabled in committee on party line. So
that's unfortunate.
And transmittal is this Friday. So, getting that back to life and to the floor is unlikely, especially with the party line vote for that one.
Really, party line?
Party line. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thanks. Anything additional to report on?
Yeah, I have two things. I'll give you a brief update on some of the other bills real quickly. The bill to revise zoning laws that would basically eliminate zoning, that was luckily tabled. We have other bills that we're monitoring right now that you have in your report. It's been updated since then because bills are just being added all the time. But ones that I think are important for you to know about there was a hearing today, and thank you, Frank, for preparing just to have the committee push the hearing on Senate Bill 254 to the very end of the agenda, which would be during our council meeting. But we will get comments to them, but that is to prohibit the direct or indirect, through an association, essentially, expenditure of public money to hire a lobbyist. We have prepared comments for that, but we will get that out to them. That bill was scheduled actually for Wednesday last week when all the city managers and mayors were in town, and purposefully rescheduled to today. So we will do our best to get comments in for that. That one would affect the Montana League of Cities and Towns, the Resort Tax Association, and us as a city to hire a lobbyist. There is another bill, Senate Bill 56. That one's gone through the Senate and in the House on first reading back in last week, and that would increase the employer contribution for PERS to about, I think it's 0.1% every year for the next 10 years, kind of what they did 10 years ago or so, to try to make sure that the plan is funded properly for retirements. That's just another added cost that the city will face this coming year. And that is likely to pass. The House Bill 492, that was scheduled for a third reading today on the House floor. It passed. That would revise municipal zoning laws related to parking requirements. You could not have parking requirements in the city for any type of development. Senate Bill 146, the creating the Private Property Protection Act, that was the one that would get rid of zoning. That one's dead, though they did have a motion to reconsider after it already had been indefinitely postponed, and that failed. There's a lot of back and forth going on where bills are being reconsidered on the floor this week. There was a bill to amend the Montana Lakeshore laws. That was carried by Fern, Senate Bill 304. It was tabled in committee, but it would have basically allowed the city to enforce action on the situation we had on our lake, where the property is in the county, but the lakeshore is in the city's jurisdiction. That was tabled, unfortunately, but there's another lakeshore law out there that would essentially grandfather anything that's done if not caught within 3 years, and then goes on to allow some minor work as well. So we're tracking that bill and have provided comments in opposition. Another bill that just, it passed out of the Senate, and we provided testimony on that, that is now in the House, will amend zoning regulations to allow taller buildings. So you could not prohibit anything under 6 feet tall, or 6 stories tall, 6 feet. That's not good. I guess I can fit in there, but you guys can't. Okay, yeah. So 6 stories, and I believe that's in commercial zones. Senate Bill 266 just passed the Senate floor today on third reading, and will go to the House. That's to revise municipal zoning to allow for triplexes and fourplexes for cities with a population of 5,000 or more in any residential zone. So that one is likely to, well, it'll go to the House. We'll see what happens there. Short-term rentals, Senate Bill 336, that bill was amended and passed by committee, so it will be on the floor soon so that it can get to the House probably by transmittal. That would allow a short-term rental of another unit. So if you have to be a primary resident, which is only 183 days in this bill, which hopefully they've gotten that changed to at least 7 months, but to be consistent. But the idea is that that would allow the short-term rental of another unit on that same property, or the a property and a property adjacent to it if that is the same owner. I believe it's been amended to remove that other parcel, but still includes the ability to rent another unit on your primary residence property. Unfortunately, I see that as last legislative session, they say mandatory, you have to allow ADUs. Well, now you will basically allow an ADU to be a short-term rental by law. So we did provide testimony against that. I spoke to Senator Fern when I was in Helena, and he was working on amendments, though the amendments that have been passed, I do not believe protect the current zoning that we have. Let's see here. There's just a bunch. There's the voter levy ones. There was a bill to sunset or reapprove voted levies. So our 24 mil levy that we have for our fire department was voted in it was approved by voters in 2010 or 2009. I can't remember which year, but that was to fund our fire department going 24 hours. The good news about that bill, because it's gone through, it was tabled in committee, it was pulled from the committee by the Senate. They considered it, it failed. They reconsidered it, they amended it, and now it's passed through. But they did amend it to exempt from that law where it would require voter reapproval every 10 years, fire, police, emergency medical services, schools, and community colleges. So at least from our perspective, our levy is exempt from those new laws, but that will go over to the House for their consideration. One that I think we still want to oppose, because you never know what kind of voted levies you need to bring forward that aren't related to police and fire. And then finally, there are 2 resort tax bills out there. One doesn't affect us because we cannot right now use the additional 1% that was for infrastructure. They're changing that definition to also include workforce housing. But Senate Bill 172 that is carried by Senator Fern would allow Whitefish to utilize the additional 1% in the future. We'd have to, of course, go to our voters to see if they want a 4% resort tax, and you could use that for infrastructure or workforce housing in that bill. It's very clear that only resort tax communities that exceed the population threshold that are in effect and approved as resort communities as of January 1 of this year can have that additional 1%. And I think there was some negotiations there of future communities that become resort taxing communities maybe shouldn't get it. And I think I know why with specific legislators and the communities that have tried to pass resort tax more recently. But so that's a good one to watch, and it's not something that we necessarily move forward with right now or in the next 10 years, but it's a good tool for the city to have if we ever need to increase the rate of resort tax to fund housing. So with that, that is all I've got for legislative session right now. If you have questions, please feel free to ask me about any of the bills. The other thing that just came up today, and you've likely received an email, but the Montana Department of Transportation is going to be holding a couple open houses related to the Kalispell and Whitefish access plans. So there is a conflict though with our budget work session. So May 27th, they're going to have an in-person open house here at City Hall from 4 to 6 p.m. That is the night of our budget work session. So we have two options. One, we could hold our budget work session in the small Whitefish conference room, but that tends to be the budget meeting that we have more departments attend. Or we could look at moving that to May 28th, the Wednesday, instead of Tuesday after Memorial Day, and move our budget work session a day. It's kind of up to you guys how you want to proceed. Or we can start later, but knowing that it gets over at 6, we probably couldn't start till 7, and so it would be a much later budget work session.
I think it would be a bit awkward if they were holding a public house on a plan that's going to affect us, yet we're all in there.
I agree.
So I would kind of lean towards moving our meeting if possible.
Yep. Does Wednesday the 28th work for everybody right now?
So far.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll update the calendar and get that out. And I think that's all I have for this evening.
Great. Thanks, Dana. Appreciate it. You did receive the letter from BMCA. We addressed that earlier in the meeting. Kim, thanks for coming. Unless there's no other comments, we will move on to communications from the City Council to start with. Who'd like to begin? Giuseppe.
This morning, I attended the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee, and we celebrated one of our long-timers staff that is retiring, and she said, well, you will still see me because I love this town. I'm not going anywhere. So I wanted to publicly congratulate Karen for 27 or 29 years of service with the town, who's going to retire soon.
Thanks, Giuseppe. Steve.
Yeah, I just wanted to, at the end of our work session, Frank decided to change his vote, and I wanted to give Frank a chance to discuss that potentially, because Dana asked me to bring it up, so.
No, to the extent anybody missed it, given the context and the vote that was essentially a tie, I will support, I don't know if we weren't taking a real vote, I will support a July 1 fiscal year for purposes of starting any compensation for this council, as opposed to waiting until January 1 with the next one. I just think syncing it up with with our budget year is probably a better idea on all kinds of levels. So,
Can I follow up on that?
sure, yeah.
Dana, when is open enrollment for health benefits with the city? Can one enroll any time within the fiscal year or a certain period?
So, well, our open enrollment is May. Right now, I would have to confirm with MMA, we're saying we're providing a salary with the option for health insurance. And so we'll have to look to see if there's a way of making that an open, because you'd be a new employee, basically, with the wages, I think you would be able to have open enrollment when you start getting paid.
That was
It
my-
wouldn't have to go back to May. or
Okay.
June.
And that was your main rationale for, quote, changing your vote? Is that correct?
No, the rationale, well, yes, it is, but it isn't because of the open enrollment. It's because the costs associated with whatever benefit we provide here is going to be tied to the cost of, in some form or fashion, probably with our insurance. And so from a budgeting perspective, we will know at that point on July 1 and can plan for on an annual basis very easily the costs that are associated with any change in that compensation if it includes insurance. That's my theory.
And that's fine. We can discuss
Yeah.
this during
Yeah.
the public hearing.
Yeah, but that's my rationale.
Giuseppe, please.
Just a quick comment. I think that if we know what is going to happen, people can open enroll starting in May because, again, we already have access to the health insurance. So it's a matter of when the refund starts. We don't have to be employees, if I understood it from. So I think every scenario can work because there is no constraint in that sense.
Yep. Thanks, Giuseppe. Anything further tonight, Frank?
Oh, for me, yes.
Yeah.
I want to pass along a correction that Richard earlier in his public comment suggested that we all attend a fire program down at, I guess, at FACC. And he suggested it was on the 7th, which is being Thursday. Apparently, Thursday is in fact the 6th. So the program is at FCC on the 6th, which is again Thursday, as opposed to the 7th, which he thought was Thursday. So I'd like to pass that along. And I just, as a point of I don't know, personal, whatever you want to call it, I would, John, you complimented Maria on her staff report. I will tell you, and I think you know this, in all my years with the park board, there has never been a staff report that wasn't from her, that wasn't incredibly detailed and straightforward and easy to understand. And so I echo your compliment, but it's not something that just happened this time. She's really good. And then just for everybody's consideration, I'm not dressed up because I like to be, but I do like to dress up. But I was, as Dana suggested earlier, I was in the process of trying to testify on behalf of the city at the Capitol by Zoom. They had proposed that meeting start at 3 o'clock. At some point, just prior to 3 o'clock, they said, oh no, we're not going to start until 3:30. Then, when they started the meeting, they didn't even start with the bill that was supposed to be started with. They started with some other bill. And then, as a point of control, the budget chair, or the chairman of the committee, decided to put 5, not 1, but 5 other bills in front of the bill that we were to testify on. I don't know how to interpret that as any other way, but they were doing everything they could to avoid hearing from their constituents, and in particular, the people that would be most affected by that, by the bill that was proffered. So my plan is to reach out to Dave Fern and ask him to see what he can do to correct this problem. He was not involved. This was a committee he's not on, but it's just wrong. It's a disservice to every citizen throughout this state, and I just find it offensive. That's all I got.
Thanks, Frank. Ben? No comments. Thank you, Ben. Andy?
First, just, Dana, you brought it up when going back to our first item in the work session today about possibly doing a community service or survey about garbage service. I think if everybody nods their head, I think that's maybe a good idea if we need to provide it or not. I mean, we should probably, as long as we're at some kind of crossroads here, maybe to answer the question. So anyway, and then other than that, I just want to acknowledge community lost a great person that did a lot in this community over the years on so many, many levels, and that was Harry Brown, and I just would like to send our condolences to his family and just acknowledge all of the many great things that he did in this community over the years, and always did it with a big giant smile on his face, and he was a good man, and we'll miss him, so.
Thanks, Andy. Well, Ben. Yep.
Sorry for a late comment I just thought of.
Good.
We had a letter up here a couple weeks ago from the Climate Action Plan Committee advocating for a paid parking arrangement. At that time, we had only 4 council members. I think we said, let's just not discuss this now, let's discuss this when we have more council members. As the council representative of that committee, I do think it would be nice if we provided some sort of feedback to them one way or another on our temperature for their proposal, which would be for a paid parking arrangement either now or in future council.
Thoughts?
We just found the funding for the snow bus.
I'm certainly open to have the discussion. Yeah. Is everyone comfortable with that? Okay.
Never hurts to talk, but I'm not in favor.
Understood. Do you need direction on that, Dana? Or, I mean, can we just squeeze it into a future work session?
Yes, in June. I mean, we're booked through June 3rd, so
that's quite all
actually
right.
maybe through June, might be July, but we could reach out to the committee members and let them know that there's interest to discuss it and see if they want to take the lead on it, or if they're looking for staff support. I think I think Karen's on that committee potentially, and so we'll be finding a replacement.
Is it something we could add to our, potentially our, I don't know when we're having our retreat. I would assume usually it's in the spring sometime, but we haven't talked about it. Would it be something that we would add to that?
I think we can, but we're certainly going to need a lot of staff input and committee input. Okay. And they're typically not present at that meeting, or at least staff is.
Okay.
Yeah. So I maybe prefer a work session. Okay. So, anything further, Ben? No. I had a couple items. I'm sure many of you heard about the damage to the pickleball courts that resulted from the wind storms that we had a few months ago. And I received calls a call from Carol Atkinson, and then a follow-up email from Donnie Beckwith that I believe you were copied on, Angie, or Dana. You were not. Okay, I'll have to forward you that email, but their concern is, well, I thought you did respond, Angie, that you were reaching out to MMIA regarding coverage for the damages. That was going to be my question.
I did reach out to them, and MMI did deny coverage for the damages.
And why is that?
Because we didn't really put up the fence, and our lease for Smith Fields involves the land, not necessarily improvements that they had made. So, and I believe that the cost of putting up that fence, and Maria can certainly correct me, was
$38,000 damage claim.
Yes, yeah. It was significant to put up that fence. MMI's take on it was it should not have cost that much to replace that fence. So MMI did deny coverage.
Have we circled back with Don Beckwith?
No, I believe that once we turned it over to MMIA, they circled back with Don.
Okay. Well, I'll circle back with Carol and Don and just let them know we at least discussed it as a council. Frank?
That just highlights another interesting conundrum we have with Kids Sports Park. And given we just lease the land and we're not responsible, is providing some level of insurance to them for the structures that are there, is that a possible thing that we could offer or provide support for kids sports that wouldn't be that expensive to the city and would be of obviously real value to the sports park and the kids?
I'd have to talk to MMIA. One of the things that we did look at is asking MMIA to cover it and us cover the deductible, but that's kind of up to you folks, and it's also going to set a precedent for other facilities that we own and you lease out to.
So with that property, unlike the waive where our contract does say we carry the property insurance and they can make claims against it, and it shows in our budget. In fact, I was just pulling it up real quick. It's not a small dollar amount when you look at property insurance for us. Just the waive itself, and likely the waive would be higher than what we're seeing there, but we're paying $27,000 a year in property insurance for the waive. So it would be a significant amount of money, but, and we do cover it already because it's our assets. But their lease, the lease with the waive is very specific that we carry the property insurance. The one with Smithfields is that they carry it. In fact, Donnie had come to me years ago and said, hey, how can we buy your insurance through you? And I said, you can't, because MMI is a municipality pool, essentially. So it'd have to be covered under us. But we do technically have the coverage for it being our facility, or we should. I don't know if the dollar amount, though, would still be, in question because of what we've reported as value to on our property insurance report to them. So we value the projects that have gone up, and it's a new project, so it might be within the fiscal year, so it might be okay that we wouldn't have it, because we usually have coverage. Projects don't have to be on it to the next renewal period, but we'd have to discuss that.
Okay, this is an asset of the city, as the waive is. I just think and I understand what our agreement is, and it's different than what is with the waive. And maybe even different than what's within the hockey den. But I kind of feel like this is part of the city, and it's an asset of the cities, and we probably ought to, in some small respect, I feel like we ought to be able to and should support it on some level, certainly from an insurance perspective. And, whether the operations, we want to contribute to that, that's a different issue. But that just seems to me to be a fairly low-hanging fruit in a way we could support that facility. And so if it's a budget issue, that I would ask that we at least be able to look at that and consider it and see if it's anything we can afford.
Duly noted. Thanks, Frank. I've got a couple more items. Angie, do you mind following up with me just with a brief email regarding our meeting with WLP a few weeks ago? I would like to get an email out to Paul at Stoltz, if you could just provide kind of a quick summary of something the city staff supports that I can send along to Paul. That would be great.
Sure.
I appreciate that. I was walking downtown, I think over the weekend, and obviously noticed a lot of the vacant storefronts. And what jogged my mind was why we haven't seen a proliferation, or at least pressure from formula retail to locate in Whitefish. And I think it's a real concern of ours, given the popularity of our town and businesses moving into our town. And as you know, that we restrict formula retail in the WB3 in the downtown core. Ironically, Dave sent an email last week that I just saw today voicing or expressing that same concern, and whether or not we need to tighten up the formula retail code in our zoning. And I think it's something we at least need to talk about as a council. And Dave, do you have anything to add? I know there's been some inquiry from formula retail outfits.
Yeah, I mean, the way our code reads, basically you have to meet two of these different criteria. One is a trademark, one is similar items. It's basically designed that, somebody like a McDonald's could come in if they had a different menu, they didn't use their logo. There's ways around it, the way it's written right now. And I think if it's truly a concern, which I hear from you guys and from other people in the community, we might want to consider, looking at that and figuring out if we, tighten it up a little bit. Maybe it's, one of those items. You have to have 12 businesses, which I think is probably fine. But I think really looking at the, the type of stuff that people are selling, if we're really trying to keep those out. I mean, some communities allow them, but they just have to have everything different so it doesn't look like a standard. I'm just going to use McDonald's as an example, but you know, there are communities where they are able to come in there. They just, you know, don't look like one, but they have the same food basically. But
is that something staff, with the direction from council, could start looking into as some recommendations on some zoning?
So we could either have a work session to kind of go over options, or, you know, we could pull something together and, you know, kind of bounce it off you guys and then bring it forward to the community development board.
That's something you'd support. Steve, do you have a comment?
I would. Well, I just wonder how that meshes with what we're talking about in the economic development chapter of the growth policy. If there's, it seems like recommendations would come in that chapter for something like this. Recommendations to changing the zoning would, I mean, I guess we could do both at the same time, but I would hate for us to spend a lot of time figuring out what we want it to be and then have something that's in the growth policy that's different, or it feels like the cart is leading the horse, or the other way around, which way it should go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's something we specifically looked at with our economic development or our zoning, you know, with regard to franchises. I mean, right now you know, franchise retail is allowed in the WB2 zone. Franchise restaurants require a conditional use permit. Franchise retail requires a conditional use permit in the WB1, which is out on Wisconsin Avenue. In downtown, it's, you know, completely prohibited. However, a formula service, say like a national chain hair salon, would be allowed because that's not a retail. It doesn't fall under our retail, it would fall under services. So that's something that, you know, we might want to look at. We don't restrict formula hotels. Again, another thing that, you know, things that we could discuss and get some feedback. And it's really the policymakers that would set that. I don't know that the growth policy would make those decisions.
Right. I just wonder if there needs to be a recommendation in the growth policy, or we just take care of it before that time. I don't know.
I think before that time, considering we're not going to have a final growth policy adoption for over a year, personally. Ben?
Yeah, I think the formula retail ordinance is a very important part of what makes Whitefish Whitefish. And I think if the planning director and the mayor are concerned there may be loopholes that exist in those regulations, then I'm concerned. And I would rather get in front of it and deal with it now than have something come along that we don't expect or don't want and then we can't deal with it. And so my preference would be to, if there are better ideas, let's get them out and get it done.
Okay. Thanks for the input, folks. Is that clear enough direction, Dave? Okay, great. Just wanted to remind everyone, Karen's retirement party is this Friday, if I'm not mistaken, from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Montana Tap House. So please show up if you can make it to show some support for Karen. And finally, yeah, I noticed your dress tonight, Frank. And I thought you were trying to one-up me just because your plaque now says deputy mayor. So, or push me out, given I'm wearing a flannel. But I wanted to thank Frank for spearheading the council during meetings in my absences the last several months. Much appreciated. So, done an incredible job. On that note, anything additional from staff? Craig?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the Karen comments. You know, there hasn't been a public works project in the last 3 decades that Karen hasn't, you know, at least had some role to play, and so her fingerprint is well established in this town, and I just wanted to double down on the thank you for almost 30 years of service to the city of Whitefish. So hopefully you guys can all make it to the Tap House this Friday. Ed Doctor has graciously welcomed us, so we'll see you then.
Graciously?
Well, you know Ed.
Not gracefully.
Maybe not quite that graciously.
Didn't you have a card
He said we
you were
can show
passing
up.
around? Because I never saw it.
We do. Yeah, it's somewhere.
All right.
Okay, it's over here.
Okay.
So, anything further from staff, council? We are adjourned. Thanks.